How's it going, everyone? My name is Kel, also known as Red Zone Rogue, and I'm one of the official Shadowverse Evolve English Edition ambassadors. Today, we're going to break down the entire meta for the very first Shadowverse Evolve English Edition Grand Showdown, the Grand Showdown Los Angeles, the very first large open invite event for Shadowverse Evolve English Edition. And I personally had an absolute blast with the event. I had the absolute honor of doing casting and coverage for this event alongside fellow Shadowverse Evolve English Edition ambassador Ignidius, and it was everything that I was hoping for. These big open invite events are really important to card players here in the West, and I think they delivered, and it was just an excellent time. So like I said, in today's video, we're gonna break down the entire meta, like go over the percentages of all of the classes that were represented in the event, and then we will literally go over every single deck in the top 4. Bushiroad was kind enough to supply me with the deck logs for all 4 of the top 4 decks, and we're gonna kind of like break down and analyze all of those. I'm really excited for this, so without further ado, let's hop into our nifty little overlay. Well, here we go. Here is me and fellow Shadowverse Evolve ambassador Ignidius, and I do want to mention that Igni will also be casting a future Grand Showdown event, right? This is not just the only one, this is but the first of many. That's right, we have Grand Showdown Singapore coming up, and Igni will be one of the casters for that event. I will not be one of the casters, but I will be watching along at home with everyone else. I'm actually really excited for it, so stay tuned for that. Now, let's get on with the meta breakdown, and I have prepared a little well, I didn't make this video. It's just a nice little visual for y'all to watch while we actually go over all of the stats, all the numbers. Let's get into the numbers. All right, so the event had well over 200 participants total, which is really cool. Great showing. And we also have the breakdown. Now, it was pretty even across the board with 2 major outliers. The 2 major outliers are the ones that you would come to expect, I imagine. We had RuneCraft with about a 23% showing, as well as Abysscraft with a 20% showing. All the other crafts were pretty close at 15% after that, with Dragon and Haven and Forest all kind of around 15%, Sword at around 11%, and then the one singular Uma Musume faithful coming on in, just repping their presumably their favorite class there. And this is kind of what I expected, right? A pretty even spread across the board, because I really do feel that all of the classes are viable. You just gotta kind of pick and choose whichever one that you are, you know, jiving with the most. And the winner of the event, if you don't know, might actually surprise you, which I think is very cool. So now going into the top 32, we do see a bit of a fall off for a lot of these classes, right? And some of them have a bigger representation than you would think, right? So going to the top 32, we have a 21% representation from both Dragoncraft and Havencraft. So they had a pretty high conversion rate. RuneCraft still has the highest representation here with a 28% representation, and then Abyss, Forest, and Sword all kind of fell off a little bit, right? Abyss now only has a 12% representation. Forest only has a 12% representation, which is really important going into the top 8. And then Sword has a lowly 3% representation, with the Uma player not making it into the top 32. Now, I mentioned Forestcraft being really important here, because Forest, even though they didn't have a very high representation going into the top 32, going into the top 8 and then the top 4, we're going to see a really big, stark change, because, well, spoilers, those Forestcraft players had an insanely high conversion rate. So going into the top 8, only 3 of the 6 classes made it. Haven, Abyss, and Sword, none of those made it into the top 8. And we had a pretty even spread across the others that did make it. So Dragoncraft, 25% representation, RuneCraft, 37% representation, and Forestcraft, 37% representation going into the top 8. Now, once we start getting into the top 4, like I said, keep an eye on the Forest, because it's going to be pretty obvious who kind of made it out of the top 8, and very interesting, because not a lot made it into the top 32. So yeah, I think that is just something to be said for the SWORDCRAFT deck in general, especially Fairy Forest. And, you know, we do have some kind of variations here in these SWORDCRAFT decks, but they're kind of all relying on playing in that kind of like Fairy Forest, Amataz space. And then, of course, we have the Dragoncraft and the Runecraft. So, without further ado, let's jump into the top 4 and break down every single one of these decks. So we're going to go over the decks in order of essentially how they placed, right? So here we have the 4th place deck. This is, I like the deck name, just Fairy deck. This is a Fairy Forest deck, and for the most part, this is what would you'd expect from a list, right? It runs a lot of your staples, like you have your Blessed Fairy Dancer to pump up your squad. You have your Amataz to also pump the squad, but to also give them Storm so you can crash in for a ton of damage. You have your role players like Fairy Circle, which just helps you fill up your board. We have some really nice removal cards with Archer, which you can, you know, play Archer and then run out a bunch of fairies. We saw this over and over at the event. We have big finishers like Sakuna, Brave and Small, to get that extra bit of storm damage. But what's really interesting about this list in particular is that it runs a 3 of Noble Fairy. And I think this is a really interesting include, as it is essentially hard removal. It's a 3-drop 3/3 with Ward, but it has Fanfare Combo 3. You select an enemy fall on the field and you destroy it, and then you summon a fairy token on that follower's field. So you basically turn one of your opponent's followers into a fairy. And this is really, really powerful when you're going up against really large statted followers. And I thought this was an interesting meta call going into this event. So this deck with Noble Fairy as kind of like this tech choice made it here all the way up into the top 4, which I really, really like. I really enjoy when you see these kind of like meta calls. All right, let's talk about the 3rd place deck. Here we have another SWORDCRAFT deck. I love this deck name as well. It says Red Zone Evo where? Soon. The answer is soon is what I have heard. But this one is also a really, really interesting list. This is one that we called on stream kind of like this Hunter Fairy hybrid. It's a really, really interesting list because it does run a lot of your staple staple fairy cards like your Fairy Circle, you have your Fairy Dragon, you have your Elf Song, and even Amataz and Spirit Shine for all of that fairy goodness. However, it runs a couple of really interesting cards. One of them is the one-off Izudia Omen of Unkilling, which is a really interesting card, and that has a cool Evo effect of when he's evolved, you can activate him and deal 6 damage to each enemy leader with at least 10 defense, which is a nice way to chip down some damage before you go on your Storm Rampage, which is pretty cool here. Also, other notable includes, we have another Hunter package with the Apostle of Unkilling, which is a 3-drop 3/3. You can Evo him for 1, but on Evolve, you get to go search your deck for a Hunter follower that costs 2 play points or less. It becomes a 4/4, and you get to go do that, put it on your field, and then you shuffle your deck. Now, when you do that, you can go grab either your Woodland Cleaver, which is a 2/2, and then if it's put onto the field by an ability, you give it Storm. So it's another way to get some Storm damage. They do run a single Evo version of that, which is a 3/3 on Evo, and you get to select an enemy fall on the field and deal it some damage, which is good. 2 damage, nice little tempo card there, if you can get an early Evo. Or you can go get something like Archer, which is a Hunter, which is basically going and searching for some removal, which is also pretty solid. So I do like this nice little Hunter package here. I also want to mention the 3 of Elf Girl Liza. Now this is one that did come up on stream at one point, and simply it just says, while this card is on your field, your followers take 1 less damage from enemy abilities. Now, I think this is a really, really interesting meta choice because most of the removal going around in this meta is spell and ability damage based, right? Because you have all of the Runecraft decks running around, you have even like Blazing Breath from Dragon. So yeah, I think this is a really, really interesting meta pick, and for this particular meta in like protecting your board. So not one that normally shows up, but yeah, I like pointing out stuff like this. So yeah, this was a really, really interesting deck. I also want to mention the one of Mark of 6 to kind of just you know, get that 1/over on your opponent when they're coming in with a big attack, and you can play this and make it so you don't take damage from a big attack this turn. So that's pretty sweet. Now let's get into the top 2. The runner-up for this event also played Forest. Like I said, 3 of those 4 SWORDCRAFT decks from the top 32 all made it here. And this one, I would consider this a very standard list. The outliers here, we do have that Fashionista Nelcha. This can double as either a card that pumps your damage to do, you know, more storm damage, or as removal, as it can give an enemy follower -2/-2. They run a full play set, full 3 of in the deck. And the other 2 notable includes are, well, we'll talk about the Tia first. Now, Tia is a card that saw a lot of play several sets ago, but doesn't see a ton of play these days. So this is an interesting just include in general, as I know a lot of people, including myself, have cut Tia from their decks, but this one ended up making it and being, a role player here. They do have the 2 of Tias in the Evo deck, so you can kind of get that Eve rush and give it +1/+1, and kind of get a lot of value out of that. But the biggest include in this, in my opinion, is this Greenbrier Elf, which is super interesting. So Greenbrier Elf is a 2-drop, 2/3, fanfare, banish a pixie token from your EX area, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, you can reveal a forest card from among them, put it in your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. I really, really like this card in this deck, because one of the biggest weaknesses of Fairy Forest in general is not drawing into your power cards like Amataz, and instead drawing into a lot of your little dirtly cards like Fairy Circle or your Elf Song. And if you just draw into these cards and you end up not drawing into your big finishers like Amataz, it can be kind of hard to close out the game against these other incredibly tuned decks. And I really love this because it helps you dig and helps you, smooth out your turns, smooth out your plays, and helps you get the cards that you need, at the time. Maybe you don't need Amataz because you already have them. Maybe you actually need like another board pump like Blessed Fairy Dancer, or you just need an extra bit of damage with Rhinoceroach, or maybe you need a big ward for Spinari or something. I really like this include. I think it really helps smooth the deck out quite a bit. So that was really, really cool. And then finally, we have the winner. This is Disdain Dragon. This is a disdainful taste or disdainful taste in deck. And yes, that is right. Disdain Dragon, piloted by Seabass the Fishy, ended up winning the entire event. In fact, I believe he went undefeated throughout the entire thing. I think he just clean swept this entire event with this deck, which is really, really awesome. This, for the most part, if you look at this, you could consider this a pretty standard Disdain Dragon list, right? Everything that you would expect. You have your full Disdain package with your 3 of Disciple of Disdain. I found that this card demands respect. When this card hits the field, you just see this as a 1-drop 1/2, but it puts in so much work in making the rest of your deck work well. And if you don't deal with this, you can get insane value. If your opponent doesn't deal with this, you can get insane value from something like your Servant of Disdain, or your Apostle of Disdain, or even Galmu herself. And in my opinion, this is kind of like a must-kill target. Unless you're immediately in danger of losing the game, this is a big one that you really want to deal with. Other than that, we have a 2 of Phylene, beautiful ultimate rare Phylene here, as well as the White Frost Whisper. We have a 3 of Fina, which can go get either Phylene or your Disciple of Disdain, and those are the only targets that Fina can get, right, from her, from one of her abilities, the search ability. Yeah, and the fact that this is all you can get, a lot of these decks that run Fina have a ton of different targets that can hit off of that effect, because you only look at the top 5 cards, so you want to maximize, the odds of hitting something. But the fact that it's only these 2 just shows how powerful these 2 cards are. So yeah, there's that. We also have your standard, well, maybe not standard. We have a 3 of Dragon Oracle in this Disdain list. Some Disdain decks don't run the ramp at all, and instead, you know, go for maybe more card draw or card selection, or even some more removal. But this version ends up running Dragon Oracle. I think this is also like a pretty nice include, because if you get this early, like on turn 2, then you put yourself pretty far ahead, and then late game you can just use this to draw cards to get into some of your more power cards. Other notable includes, we have a 3 of Bobbed Katha, which I really love. This card just does so much. She has so many different abilities and different modes, and she can do a lot based on your situation. If you need to pump up a follower, so you can, you know, push for lethal or maybe help clear the board a little bit better. You can heal, which is another common use, especially against the more aggressive decks, or you have a little bit of like that card selection here. And then for the Evo version, just a single Evo, you can also do very similar things, engaging all of your enemy followers so you can attack into them, dealing 2 damage to the enemy leader, or putting a card from the top of your deck into your EX area as kind of like a little card draw. But other than that, yeah, there's a lot of stuff you'd come to expect. You have your Draconeer, puts in a ton of work for what he is. You have your 3 of My Girl Forte, which also just puts in an absolute ton of work in Dragoncraft. This has been a staple since set 1 and will continue to be going forward. Total Domination is an insane card in this meta because, you know, there's a lot of decks that just absolutely swarm the board with just followers, and this is really good at, you know, clearing those. We saw this in the top 8. This card got played so much. I think at least a full 3 of in one of the games, if I'm remembering correctly. Maybe even got played 4 times, if I remember right. I think this might have gotten back. Like, he was able to get this back with some of the card effects here. So yeah, this is a pretty interesting deck, and very awesome to see win the very first Grand Showdown with a deck that a lot of people weren't considering a contender, right? A lot of folks were thinking, oh, maybe, you know, some sort of Fairy Forest variant, and obviously Kuon was the safe bet. So seeing this get so far and do so well was just awesome. Just awesome in my opinion. So yeah, that's kind of our breakdown here. I would highly recommend going and checking out the coverage. If it isn't officially all edited and up now, it will be at some point. We casted at least 1 game from every single round, and definitely worth watching. We got games with every single craft except for Uma. So we, you know, if you're a Sword fan, that we have some Sword games, we have some Abyss games, a lot of Forest, and obviously some Dragon and Haven and all that kind of good stuff. So definitely go watch that back if you get a shot. And for me personally, like I said, I just can't wait for more. This is such an awesome event, and I just want more. I just want more of these events. I want more people to show up and just to experience how awesome Shadowverse Evolve is. Literally my favorite game to play right now. It's so much fun, and I just can't wait. Absolutely can't wait to see more. So let me know what you think of all this in the comment section down below. Were you able to make it to the Grand Showdown in Los Angeles? I very much excited for the next one. Even if I can't make it personally to like Singapore, for example, I'm gonna be sitting there watching the stream with everyone else. Thank you all so much again. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Another huge shout out to Bushiroad and Cygames. And yeah, we'll see you next time.